The streets were quiet, but danger never slept. In the shadow of crime, heroes walked on four legs as much as on two. The K-9 unit was not just a team of officers and dogs, it was a bond forged in loyalty and trust. Each mission tested their courage and sharpened their instincts. From sniffing out explosives to chasing down suspects, the dogs of the K-9 unit proved time and again that bravery comes in many forms. Their story was not only about duty but about friendship, sacrifice, and an unbreakable connection between man and dog. The city of Crestwood was known for its tall skyscrapers, bustling streets, and the hum of life that never truly stopped. Yet behind the glow of street lamps and neon signs lurked dangers that ordinary citizens seldom saw. Criminal gangs, drug smugglers, and arms dealers thrived in the shadows, testing the strength of the city's police department every day. Among the many specialized divisions that fought against crime, one stood out for its unique partnership and unmatched effectiveness, the K-9 unit. The K-9 unit was not born overnight. It had its roots in necessity, when the department realized that some tasks could not be accomplished by officers alone. The sharp noses, speed, and instincts of dogs had long been used in history, but Crestwood needed something more refined, a team of well-trained German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, and Labradors that could detect, track, and protect in ways humans could not. The decision was bold, but it changed everything. At the heart of this unit was Officer Daniel Hayes, a man who believed that the connection between a handler and his dog went beyond training. Daniel was assigned Rex, a German Shepherd pup who showed unusual intelligence and focus from the very beginning. Rex was not only fast but fearless. From the first moment Daniel met Rex, he knew this dog would become more than a partner. Training was not easy. It required months of relentless drills. The dogs learned to detect narcotics hidden inside vehicles, to track scents across miles of forest, to respond to hand signals and voice commands instantly. But more than skills, the training built trust. When a handler issued a command, the dog obeyed without hesitation, and when a dog alerted to danger, the handler listened without doubt. The bond between Daniel and Rex grew stronger each day. Daniel treated Rex like family. He spoke to him not as an officer talks to a tool but as a friend talks to another soul. Rex responded in kind, always watching Daniel's eyes, always ready to protect him, even if it meant risking his life. Other handlers felt the same about their partners. Each pair in the K-9 unit carried a relationship that was half discipline, half love. Soon, the K-9 unit began proving its worth. In one operation, they tracked down a missing child in less than 2 hours. In another, they detected a hidden stash of explosives before a major public event, preventing disaster. Word spread quickly, and citizens felt safer knowing the dogs of the K-9 unit were guarding their city. But as their success grew, so did the attention of criminals. The gangs realized that the K-9 unit was a serious obstacle to their operations. Smugglers who once slipped through unnoticed now found themselves hunted down by dogs who never lost a scent. Cartels who hid drugs inside carefully sealed packages learned that nothing could fool a trained nose. And so, the enemies of law and order began plotting against the unit itself. For Daniel and Rex, this was just the beginning. They were about to face challenges that would test not only their skills but also the depth of their bond. The K-9 unit was more than a team. It was a family. And in the battles ahead, that family would need every ounce of loyalty and courage it had. The first true test of the K-9 unit came one cold evening in winter. Crestwood had been on high alert for weeks. Rumors spread that a cartel known as Black Vipers was preparing a massive shipment of narcotics through the city. Intelligence suggested the drugs were hidden in a warehouse near the old docks, but no one could pinpoint where. The K-9 unit was called in, and Officer Daniel with Rex led the charge. The night air was sharp, fog rolling across the empty port as the unit moved silently through the shadows. The handlers whispered to their dogs, who were alert, ears pricked, noses twitching. Rex pulled slightly on his leash, leading Daniel toward a cluster of shipping containers. His movements were deliberate, confident. Daniel felt his pulse rise. He trusted Rex more than any sensor or machine. Within minutes, Rex sat firmly in front of a container painted dark red. His tail stiffened, and his nose pressed against the metal. Daniel raised his hand, signaling the rest of the team. "He's found something," he whispered into the radio. The officers pried the container open, and the stench of chemicals wafted out. Hidden inside were crates stuffed with narcotics, worth millions. The bust was a victory, but it came with consequences. The Black Vipers had lost a fortune, and word spread quickly that they blamed the K-9 unit. From that moment, the cartel swore revenge. For them, the dogs were not just an inconvenience, they were the enemy. Days turned into weeks, and the unit kept striking victories. The dogs located safe houses, sniffed out weapons, and chased fleeing suspects down alleys where even the fastest officer could not match their speed. Each success lifted the spirits of the city, but with every triumph, the tension grew thicker. The criminals were watching, waiting, and plotting their counterattack. One night, while Daniel drove home with Rex sitting proudly in the back seat, he noticed a car trailing him. His instincts sharpened. He took a detour down quieter streets, but the car stayed behind. Suddenly, the headlights brightened, and the vehicle sped up. Before Daniel could react, a masked man leaned out the window and fired shots. The windshield cracked, glass spraying across the dashboard. Rex barked furiously, leaping against the metal cage between the seats. Daniel swerved, heart pounding, and managed to lose the attackers by ducking into a narrow alley. When he finally stopped, his hands trembled, but Rex's steady presence calmed him. The German shepherd's growls turned to a low whine, as if reminding Daniel that they were still alive, still together. The attempt made one thing clear: the cartel was targeting them personally. The department responded by tightening security around the unit, but it only strengthened the resolve of the handlers. None of them wanted to step back. They knew the risks when they joined. Their dogs did not hesitate, so why should they? Another major operation soon followed. The police discovered that the cartel planned to move weapons through a suburban neighborhood. It was risky, involving innocent families, but the K-9 unit was ready. Under cover of night, they moved into position. Daniel crouched low with Rex at his side, waiting for the signal. When it came, Rex shot forward like lightning, leading Daniel into a garage where armed men were unloading crates. The sight of the dog froze the criminals for a moment, just long enough for officers to storm in and secure the scene. One man tried to escape through the back door, but Rex caught his sleeve, dragging him down until Daniel cuffed him. The takedown was swift, precise, and flawless. But victory was not without cost. During the operation, another handler's dog, Luna, a Belgian Malinois, was injured while tackling a suspect who swung a crowbar. The officers rushed her to the vet, where she was treated for deep cuts. The incident shook the team, reminding them that their partners were not invincible. Daniel visited Luna later, watching her wag her tail weakly from the hospital bed. The sight hardened his determination. These dogs gave everything without hesitation. It was their duty as handlers to honor that sacrifice. The rising conflict reached its peak when intelligence revealed that the Black Vipers were preparing an ambush. The cartel had identified one of the K-9 unit's safe training grounds and planned to attack during a routine exercise. Instead of retreating, the department decided to turn the ambush into a trap. The K-9 unit would walk into danger knowingly, but this time they would be ready. On the morning of the operation, Daniel knelt beside Rex, fastening his vest. "Today will be tough," he whispered. Rex licked his hand, eyes burning with focus. The dogs seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. They were not just going for a drill, they were walking into battle. As the unit moved out, the city held its breath. It was more than another mission. It was a showdown between loyalty and vengeance, discipline and chaos. For Daniel, Rex, and the rest of the K-9 unit, the path ahead was dangerous, but there was no turning back. The morning of the ambush arrived heavy with silence. The training ground lay at the edge of the city, surrounded by half-finished buildings and long stretches of open dirt. To anyone watching from afar, it looked like a routine drill. Officers walked casually, dogs moved in formation, and radios crackled with short bursts of chatter. But beneath the calm exterior was sharp awareness. Every officer knew what was coming. Every handler kept a firm grip on the leash, waiting for the storm to break. Daniel scanned the rooftops, his hand resting on Rex's vest. The German shepherd stood tall, ears pricked, eyes fixed on the horizon. He was ready. Daniel whispered, "Easy, boy. We wait." The first shots came from the west. A sharp crack of rifles echoed across the training field, sending birds scattering into the air. Officers immediately dove for cover. The cartel had arrived. Dozens of masked men emerged from trucks, weapons raised, shouting as they charged forward. The air filled with gunfire, dust, and chaos. "Engage," the commander barked through the radio. The K-9 unit moved as one. Dogs surged forward with their handlers, cutting across the battlefield with incredible speed. Rex sprinted beside Daniel, his muscles coiled like springs. A gunman aimed toward an exposed officer, but Rex leapt at him, clamping down on the man's arm and dragging him to the ground. Daniel followed, disarming the attacker and securing him before pressing forward. Luna, still recovering from her injury, had been cleared to return, and she fought like fire. She lunged at another gunman who tried to flank the officers. Her handler shouted commands, and Luna obeyed with flawless precision, taking the man down before he could fire a shot. Blood dripped from her bandaged side, but she showed no hesitation. The cartel had numbers, but the unit had discipline. Every officer trusted their dog to do what no human could. The dogs tore through the battlefield, disarming men, pulling weapons out of reach, and forcing enemies into cover. The sound of barking mixed with gunfire created a scene that terrified even the most hardened criminal. Still, the cartel pushed hard. Smoke grenades filled the air, and masked men tried to box the officers in. Daniel crouched low behind a barrier, Rex pressed against him, panting but focused. "We move now," Daniel whispered, and together they darted through the haze. Suddenly, an explosion shook the ground. One of the trucks had been rigged with explosives. Shrapnel scattered, sending officers scrambling. For a brief moment, panic threatened to break their formation. But then the dogs steadied them. Rex barked sharply, rallying Daniel and the others. Luna growled fiercely, standing her ground despite her wounds. The handlers regrouped, forming a line, pushing back against the onslaught. Daniel spotted the cartel leader, a tall man in a black coat, barking orders near the trucks. "That's him," he shouted. The commander gave the order, "Take him down." Rex seemed to sense the importance of the moment. His eyes locked on the leader, his body low, ready to spring. Daniel released him with a single command. Rex shot forward like a bullet, weaving past bullets and smoke. The leader raised his weapon, but Rex leapt high, knocking him flat onto the ground, clamping his jaws around the man's arm until he dropped the gun. Daniel sprinted in, tackled the leader, and slapped on the cuffs. The cartel fighters faltered at the sight of their leader captured. The momentum shifted instantly. Officers surged forward, rounding up the remaining men. Dogs herded the criminals like predators cornering prey, snapping at heels, forcing them to the ground. One by one, the attackers were subdued. Within minutes, the battlefield quieted. The gunfire faded, leaving only the sound of barking dogs and the heavy breathing of exhausted officers. Daniel knelt beside Rex, who panted hard but wagged his tail. "Good boy," Daniel whispered, stroking his fur. Around him, officers hugged their dogs, relief flooding through the ranks. The ambush had been fierce, brutal, but the unit had stood its ground. They had won. The cartel had thrown everything they had at the K-9 unit, but it was not enough. The loyalty and courage of the dogs had turned the tide. The criminals who once saw the dogs as enemies now saw them as unstoppable forces. Crestwood was safe, at least for now. And in that moment, surrounded by smoke and silence, the bond between handlers and their dogs felt unbreakable. The battlefield slowly settled into silence. The air was still thick with smoke, the ground littered with shell casings, shattered glass, and abandoned weapons. Officers walked carefully through the chaos, rounding up the last of the cartel fighters. Their hands went behind their heads, their eyes darting nervously toward the dogs that still growled low, holding their ground like guardians of the field. Daniel wiped the sweat and dirt from his forehead, his eyes resting on Rex. The dog sat at his side, tongue out, chest heaving, but alert as ever. Daniel placed a firm hand on his fur. "You saved us today, boy. You saved all of us." Rex's tail thumped weakly against the ground, a sign of quiet pride. Nearby, Luna's handler crouched beside her. Blood stained her bandage darker now, but she refused to lie down. Her handler whispered soothing words, brushing her ears, promising that she would be taken straight to the medical team. Despite her injury, Luna's eyes gleamed with determination, as if she still wanted to fight. She had proven herself beyond doubt. The commander gave the all-clear signal, his voice steady though his uniform was torn and covered in dust. "Secure the prisoners. Evacuate the wounded. The city owes you all." His words carried not just authority but deep respect. News spread quickly. Within hours, the story of the ambush and the K-9 unit's victory traveled across Crestwood. Civilians who had once doubted the presence of dogs in law enforcement now stood outside the barricades, waiting anxiously for a glimpse of their protectors. When the convoy of trucks carrying captured cartel fighters rolled through the streets, cheers erupted. People waved flags, clapped, and shouted the names of the dogs they had only heard about in passing. For Daniel, the sound of the people's gratitude was almost overwhelming. He looked down at Rex, who sat proudly, ears high, as if he understood the celebration was as much for him as for the humans. Daniel could not help but smile. "Looks like you're a hero now," he whispered. Later that night, when the chaos had been cleaned up and the city began to breathe again, the unit gathered in the station. The dogs rested on mats, their handlers tending to them with care. Treats and water bowls were laid out like trophies of survival. No medals had been given yet, but the affection in every gesture said more than any ribbon ever could. The city had been saved, but the cost weighed heavy on everyone. Officers who had been close to the blast bore scars. Dogs carried wounds that would take time to heal. Yet no one doubted that the sacrifice had been worth it. They had stood together in the darkest moment and emerged victorious. The cartel leader, now in custody, glared through the bars of his cell. But even he seemed shaken. He had underestimated the K-9 unit, and now he knew firsthand that these dogs were more than just animals. They were protectors. They were warriors. In that quiet aftermath, under the dim lights of the station, Daniel rested his hand on Rex's back and whispered, "As long as we're together, this city will never fall." Weeks passed after the ambush, yet the memory of that night lived in the hearts of Crestwood's people. Streets once feared for cartel presence now echoed with laughter and the ordinary sounds of life returning. Shops reopened, children played in alleys, and families walked at night without fear. The K-9 unit had done more than win a battle. They had restored trust. At the station, the dogs became local legends. Children visited on weekends, eyes wide with awe as they watched the German Shepherd's train. They pointed excitedly at Rex, Luna, and the others, calling them heroes. Handlers smiled but always reminded the visitors that these dogs were not just heroes, they were partners, living beings who gave their all to protect. Daniel often sat quietly with Rex in the training yard. He had been through countless missions before, but this one had changed him. He realized that his bond with Rex was deeper than handler and dog. It was something unspoken, forged in fire and danger, built on trust that neither hesitation nor fear could break. When Rex looked into his eyes, Daniel saw loyalty in its purest form. Luna's recovery became a symbol of resilience. Despite her injury, she healed quickly with the care of both her handler and the city's best veterinarians. When she returned to light training, the entire unit gathered to watch. Every step she took was met with applause, as though she had just won another battle. Her courage reminded everyone that the fight was not just physical but also a matter of spirit. The commander of the unit presented medals one evening in a simple ceremony. The handlers received theirs with humility, and the dogs were awarded ribbons attached to their collars. No words could capture the pride in the room as tails wagged and eyes shone. It was not about recognition. It was about knowing that every sacrifice had meaning. Outside the station, murals appeared, painted walls showing Rex lunging at criminals, Luna standing defiantly despite her wound, and the handlers at their sides. Crestwood wanted the world to remember. To them, the K-9 unit was not just a tactical team but the heart of the city. Daniel knew the fight against crime was far from over. New threats would rise, and new missions would test their strength. But he also knew that they were ready. The K-9 unit was more than a team. It was a family, united by loyalty, courage, and love for their city. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in hues of red and gold, Daniel walked Rex through the streets they had fought to protect. People waved, and children ran to pat the dog's back. Rex walked proudly, his head held high, the embodiment of silent strength. Daniel whispered softly, almost to himself, "No matter what comes, we will stand together." And in that moment, with the city safe and the bond unbroken, the legacy of the K-9 unit was sealed, not just as protectors, but as eternal guardians of Crestwood.